Here's a quick video on setting up your transmitter's flight modes on your flaps so that you have separate elevator trims in each position of the flaps. So the first thing you want to do, go into model setup and go into aircraft type and select a wing type that gives you one channel for flaps or two channels for flaps, whatever your arrangement is, but you need to have the flaps enabled in the wing type, and then go back out and flight mode setup. I use switch D for my flaps, and with one switch, with a 3-position switch, you've got 3 flight modes. FM1 is flaps up, FM2 is takeoff flaps, and FM3 is landing flaps. And I typed the name down here so it says what it is. And when you come out of the menu, your transmitter shows you what flight mode you're in up here under the model name. And with the flap system, well, with the wing type set to flaps, you gain the flap system menu, which lets you set the travel. And I set mine to, most of my airplanes are set to where flaps up is minus 100 and full flaps is plus 100. And I adjust the travel of the flap servos in the servo travel settings because I want to see this minus 100 and plus 100. Because I use the takeoff flap position, I may change that to something like 25% or so that I get a little less than half flaps. And actually, I went the wrong way. You've got to go the same way as the flaps up position. So basically, 100 plus 100 is 200, and 100 minus 25 is 75. So that's about 1/3 of the travel by setting it this way. But you can start out with it set to 0, half flaps if you want to. I want 10 or 15 degrees for takeoff and 30 to 40 for landing. And then set the speed to 2 seconds. Don't go any slower than that. But you can see that I have the flap travel turned down to 75. That way, when I'm setting up an airplane, I won't cause a servo to stall. Generally, you might want to turn it down to plus or minus 50. And so I'll increase the travel gradually and use the sub trim to align the flaps with the wing when the flaps are in the up position. But at any rate, that's just how I do it. And also on the flap system, you have to tell it to use the flight modes and not switch D. So you need to tell it that for sure. So now the next thing is you go into trim setup, and I just set the aileron and elevator to F mode. Generally, these are set to common so that you get the same trim in each position. I don't use flight mode trim on the rudder because on the rudder, I center the rudder visually and I never trim it using the trim on a transmitter. I just don't ever trim it. I leave it centered. If a propeller plane pulls to the left when you're climbing, I correct for it with the rudder stick, or I increase the right thrust in the engine or motor. So I just use aileron and elevator for flight modes, for flight mode trim. That lets me use the regular trim levers to trim the airplane with the flaps up. And I can also use the same levers to trim it in takeoff flaps. And I can use the same levers to trim it with landing flaps. And as I change the flap position, the trims change. And when I change models or turn my transmitter off and come back to this model, it will remember these trims. So that's flight mode trims right there. That's basically all there is to it.